Oh, it's live on
love
YouTube,
to.
though.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald
Wait,
Trump
on-
left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Oh, wait,
Donald
it's live
Trump
on
left
YouTube. I think my
us
Disney
the
Plus is
worst
behind.
public health epidemic in a century.
Yeah, I'm directly on
Donald
ABC.
Trump left us
Okay.
the worst
Are they speaking right now
attack
for you?
on our democracy
Yeah.
since
Okay.
the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former
It
president
was a
intends on implementing
pandemic.
if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the
feel like
American
she's,
people want a president
using
who
old
Did you
cards
hear?
as
She's
well.
trying to
Yeah, I think-
blame the
bringing us
pandemic
together
on
when we have
Donald
so much
Trump.
more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a
She's
president
going
for all
crazy.
Americans.
President Trump will
She's
give you a
crazy.
minute to
She's going crazy.
Number
That's
one,
what-
I have
that's
nothing to
right.
do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created
You know, I
them.
saw
They
something
know
saying
it,
that the
and so does everybody
statistics
else.
Vice President
were
Harris.
inflated for Biden. That's why I always kept showing
So,
the job increase.
Donald Trump has no plan
Yeah,
for
and they've
you.
been reducing it.
And
they're
when
they're
you look at
lagging the
his economic
statistics
plan, it's all about
until like
tax breaks for the richest people.
like July. I'll say like
I
it
am
went up
offering
100,000,
what
then they'll
I
reduce it to like
describe as
20.
an opportunity economy.
So like
And
you've
the
never
best
seen so many
economists in our
retractions.
country, if not
Like
the
the
world,
finance world has
have
never seen
reviewed
this
our
many
relative
retractions ever.
plans for the future
And
of
during
America.
Trump's administration, it was like
What
it
Goldman
would
Sachs
say like,
has
okay,
said
our economy went
is
up
that Donald
50,000, and then a
Trump's
couple months later it would
plan
say,
would
oh,
make
it
the
was
economy
80,000.
worse.
Like they
Mine
were
would strengthen the
underestimating.
economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually
This is what I
has
have a
no
problem
plan
with
for you because
politicians.
he is more interested in defending himself
Make
than he is in
promises
looking out for
that
you.
make sense that you can get through Congress. Like that's the biggest
I went to the Wharton School of
issue
Finance,
Yeah.
and many of those professors, the
is
top
you
professors,
have to get it through
think
the
my plan
House
is a
and
brilliant
Senate.
plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring
there's
up our,
no
our
way,
worth, our value as a country.
like,
it's going to make people want
90%
to
of
be
our
able
stuff
to
gets
go
through
and work
Congress.
and create
Yeah.
jobs.
Like
and
it would
create a
just
lot
be
of
a
Same with
stalemate.
solid
Same with
money
Project
for our
2025.
for our country.
Half the stuff
And
they're
just to finish
promising or
off,
trying to accomplish in that,
she
it probably won't go
doesn't have
through.
a plan. She
Yeah,
copied
and I don't even
his
agree
plan,
with it. Like
and
it's
like four
it's kind of
sentences,
ridiculous some
like
of the shit
run,
that they have in
spot,
there.
Run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax.
Trev said,
Your
"Why throw
proposal
away
calls
money for
tariffs, as you
Israel, so
pointed
why
out
not?"
here, on foreign
I
imports
know, I
across
saw
the board.
that.
You
I
recently
said-
said that you might double your plan, imposing
I agree
tariffs up
with
to
them. Like, we're
20% on
funding
goods
Ukraine,
coming into
we're
this
funding
country.
Israel.
As you know, many
What they're
economists
literally
say
doing,
that
I'll
the
tell you
tariffs at
exactly
that
what they're
level
doing.
costs are then passed on to the
They're
consumer. Vice
giving
President
away
Harris has
old
argued
weapons
that'll
that
mean
just
higher
been in
prices on
storage
gas,
for years,
food, clothing,
and then
medication,
giving the
arguing
money
it
that's
costs the typical
passing through
family nearly
Congress and funding
$4,000 a
the
year. Do
military
you believe
industrial
Americans
complex.
can afford higher
And
prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher
They're using it
prices.
to
What's
develop
gonna
new
have,
weapons.
And who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration.
See what they say about this.
We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
That's true.
The people of our country are absolutely
That bacon
dying
getting
with
expensive.
what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies.
I wonder if Kamala Harris has an earpiece on the other ear, that's why we can't see it. So somebody's out there
I
telling her
literally
to
was
say.
just going to say something like that.
I feel like that one side of her hair is kind of covered over there.
To support America's workforce.
Yeah, you can't say anything though,
so that we
because
don't end up
they'll say
having
he's sexist.
on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
Alex
First
just
of all,
said
they bought
Trump
their
sold
chips from Taiwan.
American
we hardly
chips to
make
China.
chips
No,
anymore because of
American chip
philosophies
manufacturers
like they have
sold
and
to China.
policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no
Trump
policy.
doesn't sell
Everything
chips to
that she
China.
believed
That's like
3 years
stupid
ago
as
and
fuck
4
to
years
say.
ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now.
I think Alex is trying to say he sold the business.
She's gone to my philosophy.
No,
Instead of us making it
She
here.
got elected, she
No,
changed it.
No,
he's
all
saying
he
sold
did
as in
was
like
Be the
folding.
end of our country.
Sold as in folding,
She's
I
a
think is what he's trying to
Marxist.
say.
Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
Nah, he
Her
allowed it
father's
to
a
happen,
Marxist
but it wasn't
professor
like
of
top of the
economics,
line
and
chips.
he taught her well.
I don't think you
But when
understand.
look at what
They're not
she's
allowed.
done to
We're not
our
allowed to give
country,
them,
and
like
when you
NVIDIA
look at
can't
these
give them their
millions and
H100
millions of
chips.
people that are pouring
No,
into
Brad,
our
he's
country
trying to say
monthly,
sold as in
where
like,
it's,
yo,
I
you
believe,
sold as in
21
like you
million people,
folded or
not
like you.
15
Gotcha,
that people
gotcha.
say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you.
What the fuck is she doing?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often
She's
touted that
listening.
you were able
She's
to
being
kill
astute.
Roe v. Wade.
She's being an observer.
Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they
This might be his
have
weakest
abortion
point.
in the 9th month. They
This is getting
even have, and
interesting.
you can look at the governor
Yep.
of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states.
Oh, he meant
and
Virginia.
Through the genius and
I forget his guy's name, but he's right.
6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions.
But it's Glenn
Very
Youngkin
important.
now is the
But we were
governor of
able to get
Virginia.
it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got
Kamala.
here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care in one
like he
state
dyed
that
his hair
provides prison
dark.
for life.
Don't you think?
Trump
Yeah, a
abortion
little
bans
bit.
that make no
Might just be
exception
the
even for
angle
rape
of
and
the
incest,
lighting.
which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime
Wait, what is this
of violation
Trump abortion
to their
ban, though?
body does not have the right to make a decision
Trump
about what
abortion
happens
ban?
to their body
What
next.
she's
That
mentioning,
is
she said that
immoral.
there's some states with the Trump
And
abortion
one
ban in
does not
place.
have to abandon their faith.
No, he never put
or
anything in
deeply
place.
held
In fact, he
beliefs
said he
to
would ban
agree.
anything that
the
abortion
government and Donald Trump
tried to
certainly
pass
should
through
not be
Congress.
telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term,
They're talking about
suffering from a
Alabama.
miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding
you're gonna
out in her
have
car in the parking lot.
if you're gonna bring
She
up
didn't want
Alabama, you
that.
got to bring up
Her
like
husband didn't want
California.
that.
California
A 12 or
allows abortion
13-year-old
up to the 9th
survivor of
month.
incest
Like
being forced
you're
to
gonna
carry
have your
a pregnancy
extremes.
to term.
Right.
They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade,
Oh,
as
there it
President
is.
of the
That's her
United States,
tagline.
I will proudly
Roe
sign
v.
it
Wade.
into law. But
Gotta
understand,
whip out the.
if Donald Trump
gotta whip
were
out
to
the
be
Trump card.
reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion.
See, but she keeps
a
associating him to
monitor
Project
that would be
2025,
monitoring
in which
your
he's already stated that he's not
pregnancies,
part of.
your miscarriages. I
Yeah.
think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back.
This is where I
into
have
the
a problem
states,
with her.
and the states
That would
are
never
voting.
pass
And it may
Congress.
take a little time.
Right.
But for 52
They need
years,
75
this issue
votes to
has
pass an
torn
amendment.
our country apart.
That's
And
the
they
only
wanted
reason why it was
back
in law
the
is because the
states. And I
Supreme
did
Court
something
ruled
that
on it, and
nobody
it was the
thought
final say.
possible.
Right.
It was
States
never
are now
law
voting.
in Congress.
What she says is an absolute
Biden
lie.
said he was gonna
And
do
as
it.
far as the
Obama
abortion
said he
ban,
was gonna do it.
no, I'm not in favor
Clinton
of abortion
said he
ban,
was gonna
but
do
it
it.
doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe.
This man.
The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss.
Oh, I got 26
if you
viewers?
call him a boss, she spends all his
Damn,
time
how's
on the beach.
everyone doing
But look,
tonight?
her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different
Who
way.
said
And he
that?
went out, got rejected
Alex.
again by the Supreme
That
Court.
dumb bitch.
So all these
Or
students
Maka
got
John. Yeah, he is dumb
taunted
bitch.
with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have
There
been
it
part
is.
of the reason
See,
they lost. To
He said
millions
she would
and
never get
millions
the
of
vote
people
right
that
there.
had to pay off their student
the most
loans.
truthful thing
They
he'll
didn't
say
get it
all
for
night.
free. But they were
I
saying
think
it's the
you're
same
behind
way
on me.
that they
He's already
talked
talking about
that,
the student
that
loans.
They talk about abortion.
Oh, I might
But
be.
if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all
Oh, there.
fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking
What are
for
my
me,
thoughts
but
so far?
I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it.
If
because
Trump
Yeah, what
is
are
saying
your
the
thoughts?
truth,
Be able to get
if
it,
Trump's
just like she
saying the
couldn't
truth
get
right now,
student
because he
loans,
said
they couldn't
J.D.
get student
Vance
loans.
also
They didn't
stated
even
that they
come
would
close to
veto
getting
the
student
abortion
loans.
ban.
They taunted.
Yeah, they would.
But then now
He
Trump's
said
saying that he
that
wouldn't.
yesterday in a
People that
podcast.
had loans.
Right.
They
But
could
Trump's
never
saying
get
he
this
wouldn't. But now
approved.
they're saying
So it
now they're
doesn't matter what she says about going to
combating their
Congress. So wonderful. Let's go
their
to
interests right
Congress, do
here.
it.
So I don't know what
But the
exactly
fact
the
is
truth
that
could be.
for years they wanted
He's
to get
saying
it out of
if
Congress and
Congress,
out of the federal
like the
government.
Republican
And we did
Congress, tried to
something
pass
that
like a
everybody said
6-week
couldn't be
ban,
done. And
he
now
would veto
you
it.
have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions
Oh,
on
here
a
it
woman's
is.
right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women.
Wait, they're
who
being
are
denied
working one or
IVF
two
treatments?
Jobs, who can barely afford
Alabama, it's
childcare
so
as
wrong.
it is, have to travel
didn't-
to
I didn't know
another
that.
state to get on a plane
Yeah, and he said it's
sitting
wrong,
next to
too.
strangers
And he said the
to
government-
go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people
She's
of
really playing
America
the woman card
have not.
today.
The majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to
She's
make
backing up
decisions
her
about her own
audience.
body, and
Yeah,
that is why
that's exactly right.
in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that
Why
question?
don't you answer
That's the
the
problem.
question, would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia
this
said
true?
we put the baby aside and
What?
then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're gonna
About
turn
the
now to
doctor saying
immigration
they can
and
put the
border
baby
security.
aside and
We know it's
they'll
an issue
decide what
that's
to do with the
important to
baby?
Republicans, Democrats, voters
Yeah.
across the board in this
So
country.
they're actually
Vice
giving an
President
abortion
Harris, you
to
were
a
tasked
born
by President
child.
Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America.
I don't think that's
we know
true.
that illegal border
I've not
crossings
heard
reached
anything
a
of that.
record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until
Yeah, a
6
doctor
months
actually
before the
gave
election to act?
a
And would you have done anything differently
A
from President
doctor
Biden on
who
this?
So I'm the only person on this
performs
stage
abortions
who has
went to Congress
prosecuted
and showed
transnational
what
criminal
a
organizations
8-month
for the trafficking
abortion
of guns,
entails.
drugs,
I don't know
and
about
human beings.
after
And let
being
me
born.
say that the United States
I think it
Congress,
happened like
including
once or
some of the most
twice, and
conservative members of the
he
United
saw
States
the
Senate,
example.
came
I don't
up
think
with
it's
a
happening
border
as often as
security
they're
bill,
portraying,
which I supported.
but it definitely did happen.
And that bill would have put 1,500 more border
In fact, they
agents
found
on
a
the border
baby
to
in a
help
trash
those
can,
folks who
and
are
the
working
doctor
there
was
right now
arrested.
overtime trying to do their
Shit,
job.
I didn't know that.
It would have
But
allowed
one,
us
you know
to
what I mean?
stem
Like
the
one.
flow of fentanyl coming
Right.
into the
Trev,
United States.
since when?
I
Since
know
when
there's
what?
so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational
No one is
criminal
getting 8 or 9
organizations
month
for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human
9-month
beings. But you know what
abortion.
happened to
I
that
don't
bill?
think it's high. I think
Donald
it's like
Trump got
less
on the
than
phone, called
percent.
up some folks in
8th,
Congress
7th,
and
and
said,
8th
kill
month's
the
more
bill. And you know
common.
why? Because
I
he
think the
preferred to
most
run
is
on a
between
problem
4 and
instead of
6.
fixing a problem. And understand.
I mean, I
as
don't know why they
Congress,
just can't
at a
cut it in the
time
middle and say
where
5 months.
The people of our country
like, what's your
actually
thoughts on
need
that,
a
Alejandro?
leader
Like, if you
who
can't
engages
decide
in
if you want to keep the baby
solutions,
within 5
who
months,
actually addresses the problems
now,
at hand.
if the
But
mother's
what we
health is
have
at
in the
risk, if
former
the
president
baby,
is someone who would
or
prefer to
like
run on a
anything that
problem
comes into the
instead of
health
fixing a problem.
endangerment, I
And I'll
get
tell
it.
you something.
Like,
He's
if
going
a
to talk about
40-year-old woman
immigration a
gets
lot tonight,
pregnant
even
and
when
her
it's not the
life's
subject
in
that is being
danger,
raised. And
you
I'm
gotta
going to
keep the
actually
woman
do
alive.
something really unusual.
I
And
get
I'm going to
that.
invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies
said the windmills
early
killed the American
out of
eagle.
exhaustion and boredom.
Yeah,
And I will
they,
tell you,
they,
the
they
one thing you
kill
will not
birds
hear him
a
talk about
lot.
is you. You will not hear
If
him
you
talk
look
about
underneath
your
windmills,
needs, your
you'll
dreams,
see
your
a lot
Since
of
work,
when-
dead
and your
birds.
desires.
Since when
And
do
I'll tell you, I
windmills
believe you
give cancer?
deserve a president
When did that
who
I don't know
actually
about
puts
that.
you
Become a phrase?
first. And I pledge to
I
you
don't
that
know
I
about
will.
that.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that
I did
point,
hear
I want
about
to get your
birds
response.
being
would
killed.
like
It
to
was like in the
respond.
Let me
Wall
just
Street
ask you,
Journal.
why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the
This
biggest
eye
rallies,
roll.
the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
The
That's
Kamala
because
stance
people
is
wanna
going
take
crazy.
Their country back. Our country
up?
is being lost.
Kamala
We're a
stance
failing
right now is going
nation.
crazy.
And it happened 3.5 years
Yeah.
ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets
shit, I just
of the
realized.
people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as
Okay, I also have
rallies
not
are
heard-
concerned,
they're eating
as far
dogs
as-
and cats?
The reason they go is they like.
Okay,
what
I
we
haven't
you
heard of
didn't
this
see
either.
that?
Bring our
I didn't see
country
this at
back.
all.
They want to
Where was
make
this?
America great again.
Someone
Did you say
took
Aurora?
tongs.
Make America
Someone took
great again.
tongs and
She's
kept
destroying
a
this
cat
country.
over a
And if she
stove
becomes
and cooked it.
president, this country doesn't
Where
have a
was
chance
this?
of success.
in
Not only success,
Ohio.
we'll
Dude,
end
it
up
was
being
trending. And then
Venezuela on
a Haitian
steroids.
national
I just want
literally
to clarify here. You bring up
shot a
Springfield,
geese.
Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city
Well,
manager
a geese
there.
is
He
different.
told
A
us
fucking
there have
cat or
been no
dog?
credible
That-
reports
I
of
have not
specific
heard of
Bro,
that
it's
at
been
being
memes
harmed,
all
injured, or
day.
abused by individuals.
Today?
It was hilarious.
Community
Well,
also.
Let me send
I
it to
didn't see
you.
this.
Let me just
I didn't
say
see
here,
this
this
at
is
all.
The people on
This is a
television say
clear-
my dog was taken and
You need to
used
stop
for
with this
food.
rally.
So
Yeah, I agree
maybe
with
he
you.
said that,
He's-
and maybe
he's
that's a good
dragging
thing
on.
to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
That's why
dog was
all
eaten
day
by
it's been
the
cats
people
with
that
MAGA
went
hats
there.
on.
Again, the Springfield
'Cause
city
they
manager
said
says there's
cats
no
make
evidence
this,
of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask
He
people
said,
who
"Yo,
have
this fool
worked
talking
with
about
him."
my kind like
His
that."
former chief of staff,
Alex
a
is cooking
four-star
them
general,
right over the
has said he has
stovetop.
contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit.
He said for the culture.
His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Yeah, I think we're all delayed. I think Brad's behind me as
when
well.
I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your
All
deportation
right, let's get to this immigration topic.
Proposal that the vice
There we
president
go.
has reacted to as well. President Trump, you called
This
this
is where
the
she's gonna
largest
get
domestic
roasted.
deportation
He
operation
started
in the
the
history of our
Afghanistan
country. You say
pull-up.
you would use
Yeah,
the
that is
National
true.
Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have
But the ending
no
was
problem
really
using
bad.
the U.S.
You're right.
military.
He did start it.
You also said you would use local
I think there was like
police.
2,000 left.
How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher.
Door-to-door
because of them.
approach.
They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States.
She's writing
and
down notes
told
like, damn,
by
did we do
their
that?
countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been
Joe Biden got
anything
more
done like
votes than him
this
last
at all.
time. He
They've
said
destroyed
sitting
the fabric
president.
of our country. Millions of people
But yes, he
let
did
in,
get more
and
votes.
all over the world. Crime is down all over
I
the
don't
world
understand
except
that
here.
point, though, that you
Crime
made.
here is up and through the roof.
cool.
Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form
didn't
of crime.
understand,
It's called
Trev, that
migrant
comment by
crime.
him.
And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is
I
actually
thought it
coming
was
down in this
absolutely
country.
crazy,
Excuse me,
Alejandro,
the FBI
that
they were defrauding
for
statements.
3.5 years, they
didn't
let in
include
like
the
probably
worst
13
cities.
to 15
they
million
didn't
people,
include the cities
and
with
they
the
said
worst crime. It was
they'll never
a
get
fraud,
like
just like
they'll
their
never
number
get
of
this, they'll never get aid,
818,000 jobs
and then
that
they're
they
getting
said they
like
created turned out to be a
$10,000
fraud.
like blank
Trump,
debit
thank you. I'll let you
cards
respond, Vice
in New
President.
York,
Well, I think this is
and
so rich.
giving
Coming
mortgages
from
in
someone who
California
has been
because it's too
prosecuted
expensive. And then
Yeah.
Chuck
for
Schumer said the other day, we're going to
national
work to get
security
them to
crimes,
citizenship.
economic
So that's what it was.
crimes,
Everyone,
election interference
even Elon Musk was
has
like,
been found liable
for 3.5 years,
for sexual assault.
all these people
and
are
his
doing is they're
next
importing these
big
people just for
court
votes.
appearance is in November at his own criminal
That's all it's
sentencing.
about was when it
And
comes
let's
to
be
getting
clear,
to November with the
where
election.
each
Right.
person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on
be
this
honest,
same
this wasn't
old
as entertaining
tired
as seeing
rhetoric
Biden and Trump
address the needs
No,
of the
that was
American
so
people,
much better.
address what
Come
we
on,
need
now I
to
was
do
expecting some
about
content.
the housing shortage, which I
Yeah,
have
we
a
should've.
plan for. Address what we
Honestly,
must
the
do
fact
to
that this
support
is
our small
boring-
we watched it, but we didn't
Address
stream
bringing
it.
down the price of
Yeah,
groceries.
well, we were texting each other.
But frankly, the
Right.
American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy.
Yeah, that's true. I think they're painting Trump way worse than he is, and that probably is what led to that bullet to the head.
That went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking.
I mean, they were calling
now
him
you don't.
America's
you wanted
Hitler for
mandatory
what,
government
5 straight
programs
years?
for assault weapons.
Yep.
Now
No,
your
since like
campaign
2015.
says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're
Talking a
taking
decade
a harder
almost.
line. I know you say that your values
Crazy.
have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the
Trump
tie-breaking
ban
vote on the
fracking?
Inflation Reduction Act.
No,
Back in
he
20
opened new
He
leases
pushed for
fracking.
more.
So
My
Biden was the one that
position
pushed
is
for
that we
banning
have
it.
got to
Yeah.
invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in
Her main
history
policies have
because of an
completely
approach
flipped.
that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved
She said
and
she's
was able to
gonna
buy
ban
our first
fracking.
home when I was a teenager.
In fact, there's
The values
literally
I
a
bring
video.
to the
They
importance
said,
of home ownership,
raise
knowing
your
not
hand if
everybody
you
got
would ban
handed
fracking, and
$400 million
everyone on
a
stage
silver
rose
platter
their
and then
hand.
filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my
And now
work
she's for
to say
fracking.
we are going to work with the private
Well,
sector
because
and
she's in
home
a
builders
state that's
to
heavy in
increase
it.
3 million homes, increased
She's
by
got
3 million
whoever
homes by
wins
the end of my first
Pennsylvania
term.
has a
My
real
work
shot of winning
that
this
is
thing.
related to
I think it's actually the
having
most
a
crucial
friend when I was
state.
in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And
Maybe
my
the new
focus
Georgia.
then on protecting women and children
No, I
from
think
violent
Georgia's a
crime
lot.
is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the
I think it comes
importance
down
of
to
standing
Wisconsin.
up
Well,
for
I'm
those who are
saying,
most
I'm
Michigan.
saying,
vulnerable.
like 2020,
My work that is
Pennsylvania's going to
about
beat
protecting
Georgia.
Social
for
Security
sure.
and
Yeah,
Medicare
yeah, 100%.
is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Oh.
She went
Shit.
out in Minnesota and wanted to let
He said,
criminals
does that
killed
sound
people,
familiar?
that burned down
Damn.
Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. They took,
I just got to it.
They got rid of it.
Yeah, you are
started getting rid of
behind.
it, and the prices were going up.
They go
the
to
roof.
commercial off.
They
It
immediately
looks like I'm
let
like
these guys
20
go
seconds behind.
to where they were.
Damn, they
I
just
would have
cooked
been
her
5
ass.
times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful
56
transfer of power,
days.
which, of course, we
Damn.
all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago, her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear.
This has already been debunked.
Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath.
This has literally been debunked a billion times. If this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. All right, Chad, we gotta look this up.
Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future.
Yeah, that's right. Brad, do that research.
Both sides.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville,
there you go, chat.
That story has been, as you would say,
left-wing fact checker admits Trump never called Charlottesville neo-Nazis very fine people.
All of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still
already mentioned the
just like
debunking.
they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do.
She's literally in office right now.
I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill.
4 p.m.
If he signs a bill that the border is closed.
Wait till you get to it. He basically said, get Joe Biden up out of bed so he can sign the bill.
If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures.
He literally did it without Congress's approval.
I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said there was no widespread fraud.
They said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people.
He's
so
like
let's
yelling.
be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders. Some of
They're
them
laughing at Donald Trump. They must
and
be
they say you're a
giggling
disgrace.
to fucking Biden.
And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just
Kamala
quoting
Harris,
him.
like pondering
China was afraid of him.
at Donald
North
Trump.
Korea was afraid of him.
Robert Griffin III said, caption this, and Antonio Brown said, if I blow him, will I win?
I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is up.
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent
Palestinians. Why not get to the solution?
Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution.
But she hasn't had any progress on this.
And in that solution,
for the past 9 months?
It's almost been a year. People and Israel and
yeah, she just said October 7th, but then she said 9 months.
But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran.
Right.
And any threat that Iran and its proxies
It's been 11
pose to
months
Israel.
and change.
But we must have
And
a
they just
two-state
assassinated
solution where we
6
can
hostages,
rebuild Gaza,
including in America.
where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president,
he's obviously not going to give the answer to that.
If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates
These
Israel.
sorority girls, man, got their priorities mixed up.
That Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had.
That's true.
Iran
when he was in the United States, she didn't even visit him.
Hezbollah or any of the
he had to go down to Florida to meet with Trump.
Because
Biden and her
spheres of terror, horrible terror.
Both of them were at the White House.
It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
And we're getting an ad break? Come on now.
Either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden.
Your president, my boy.
Him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled.
We've given Ukraine like $250 billion, but when Hawaii burned to the crisp,
and what
we
I'll
gave
do
each
is
household
I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together.
Think about that.
That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
here... They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president?
That is true. I haven't heard anything on Biden since his withdrawal.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question.
He's been at Rehoboth this entire time.
Best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished.
No, I think he's going to New York now.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all
Europe
these human
always
lives
gives money that's a lie.
From being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President
It's
Harris.
the amount. Like, why is the United States giving a lot more
in this
when the
moment?
wars in
But also,
Europe?
as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin?
We're
and would it be any
bankrolling an
different from what we're
entire
seeing from President Biden?
war at the expense
first of all,
us.
it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial
He tried
integrity.
to make that a
And I met with
one-liner,
President
and it
Zelensky.
just died.
I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support,
we shouldn't give money to either of them. How about giving it to the people? It doesn't make sense.
The artillery, the
They're never going to do that.
The Abrams
They're never going to do that
have provided,
because bureaucrats. It doesn't benefit the bureaucrats.
No benefits of helping their own.
Putin would be sitting in Kyiv
That's why
right
Trump
now.
was a big middle
And
finger to
understand
them.
what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer
But you're right,
president,
Trev. We shouldn't give any of this
and
money.
that
We're literally
understand the importance of the greatest military
I don't
alliance the
think
world
people
has ever known,
realize,
which is NATO.
like, this
And
shit
what we have done to preserve
getting
the ability
insane.
of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their
This shit's
independence.
getting insane.
Otherwise, Putin would
And it
be
goes
sitting
up
in
$1 trillion
Kyiv with his
every
eyes on the
100
rest
days.
of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the
Like, this
800,000
is
Polish
each
Americans
taxpayer.
right here
So
in
this is me and you,
Pennsylvania
Trev.
how quickly you would
They've
give up
borrowed
for the sake of
$270,000
favor
against us.
and what you think
Israel's
is a
doing a
friendship
genocide.
with what
Yeah.
is known to be a
Like,
dictator who
Israel's
would eat you
bombing
for lunch.
indiscriminately because Hamas is literally hiding
President
among.
Harris,
They're
thank you.
being
We've heard
bastards.
from both of you on Ukraine
hiding
tonight.
and
Afghanistan
cowards,
came up in the
hiding
last
among
hour.
their public.
I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and now, please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow.
A war
and he
crime to
wouldn't have
hide
lost
among
300,000 men and women. But he would have been sitting
people.
in Moscow.
They're using
quiet,
civilians
please.
as cover.
He would have been sitting in
So
Moscow.
like Israel, who's
much
been
happier
fighting
than
them for
he is right
60
now.
years, says F it.
But eventually,
we're going
he's
in.
got a thing that
know,
other
No, I've
people
seen
don't
like
have. He's got nuclear
30,000
weapons. They don't
people
ever talk
die
about that. He's got nuclear
in a year.
weapons. Nobody ever thinks
That's
about
unnecessary.
that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible
By association.
negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban. Because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated.
He interpreted it correctly.
It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less.
Bam.
Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
She was about to call him out by his name, and that's what she paused.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Let's see what she says.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do.
Bring in the youth, the energy, the boom shakalaka.
The American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police, She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has
we do
a
have
plan
to move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
you,
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just need
going to move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we
True.
come up with something,
It's not the greatest thing out in the world.
we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still
You don't
never
have a
going
plan.
to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans.
probably
How
gotta
do you
shift
fix
to
We can
those
come up with a
how
plan
do you
that's
how
gonna
do you
cost
fix
our
Obamacare?
people, our population,
You gotta create-
less money and be
'cause
better
really,
health care than Obamacare. Then I would
Insurance
absolutely
is
do it.
almost like a
But until
duopoly.
then,
You
I'd
can only
run
do
it as
like
good
two
as it can be
insurances.
run.
You got to make
So, just a yes or no,
competition.
you still do not
Otherwise,
have a plan.
insurance companies
I
are going
have
to buy
concepts
out
of a plan.
all the smaller
Right.
ones.
I'm not president
and
right
it's
now.
going to be unaffordable
But
at some
if
point. Like, it's ridiculous.
we
Like,
come
when you
up
have a
with
kid,
something, I would only
it costs
change it if we come
thousands
up
of
with
dollars
something
in
that's better
hospitals.
and less
Like,
expensive.
that's why we
Yeah.
need
And there
to
are concepts
have more
and
hospitals
options
to create
we have
competition.
to do
Like
that.
Christianity
And
care,
you'll
I
be
don't know if
hearing
you
about
noticed,
it in the not
has
too
taken
distant
up
future.
like all
Vice
of
President
Delaware.
Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders'
Every
proposal
single
to do away
doctor's
with private
office and
insurance
place
and
you go
create a
to,
government-run healthcare
universal
system.
healthcare is a better
2 years
plan
later, you
than
proposed a plan
Obamacare.
that included a
I
private
don't think so.
insurance option.
We
What is your
can't
plan
do
today?
universal health care
Well, first
because
of all, I
we have
absolutely
universal
support and
military
over
care.
the last 4 years as
That's what
vice
we have right
president,
now. We
private
spend
health care options. But
$800
what we need to do
billion
is
a
maintain
year
and grow the Affordable
to
Care Act. But I'll get to that,
provide
Lindsay. I just
security
need to
to the
respond
world.
to a previous point that
That's
the
why we
former
can't have
president has
universal
made.
healthcare.
I've made
And we
very
have too
clear
many
my
people.
position on fracking. And then this
330
business
million
about
is too many
taking
people to
everyone's
have
guns
healthcare.
away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60
She literally rose her
times
hand
he
when
tried
in
to get rid of the
2020
Affordable Care Act.
and said,
60
would you-
times. I was a senator at the time when I
Would
will
you,
never forget the early morning
disband of
hours
private
when
insurance?
it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged
Maul is a gun
as
owner? Is she
being,
packing?
you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got
It makes
caught.
sense,
He
right?
was
Wasn't
an
she part of
American
the,
hero. The late great John
the
McCain,
law
I will
enforcement
never
team or
forget
something like that?
night, walked
Attorney
onto the
General.
Senate floor and said, "No, you
Close
don't.
enough.
She was a
No,
she
you
was a
don't.
defense,
No,
or
you
not a
don't get
defense
rid
attorney,
of the
prosecutor.
Affordable Care Act. You have no plan." And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching
Uh-oh.
tonight.
I
You
know
remember
Meghan
what that was
McCain.
like?
She about to start
Remember when
blasting.
an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right, and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be
to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. I feel like everyone should have some form of health care.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in
6 months for an issue you need immediately.
President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News
got some corruption going on for sure.
Back in a moment.
No one wants a Chinese car. They are terrible. I don't know if you've ever seen the ones recently, Trev, but they got some gadgets, and I mean like some insane ones.
Yeah, they're on the come up.
Yeah.
That's why we got Japan leading the sales in the US.
I actually just bought a stock called Li Auto from China, because their revenue is just going through the roof. Not stock advice, by the way.
Li Auto? Damn, Brad, if I lose money, I'm suing you. You said why? Li Auto?
LI is the ticker. It's like 1950
Li Auto.
share.
Yeah. Never heard of them. They're on their all-time low, though.
Yeah, I bought it because their estimations were a little too high, the analysts, and they were a little light, but they're still growing at like 25%. If you look like 6 months ago, their price was at $40.
I'll tell you this, Brad. Never, ever invest in an automotive company. They are bound to flathead or drop. There will be no growth.
Look at Tesla.
I mean,
what do you mean?
Look at Ford.
I mean, Ford, they've reduced the stock to nothing. There's so much outstanding stock that it's like $10 a share.
Yeah.
Look at this shit.
I'm looking at it right now.
$10 a share.
1032.
That's insane.
It was 262 1984. Like what? We haven't seen its all-time high since March of 1999.
Yeah. Well, that was the .com bubble.
Yeah,
Look
but
at
still.
Cisco. Look up ticker CSCO. That stock finally recovered after all these years. Here, look. You watching my Twitch?
That's been recovered.
Nah, it was.
I am looking at your Twitch. Oh, wait, hold on, but I got an ad.
Look at this. Let me know when you're here.
Oh, wait, what the fuck? Oh, never mind. I thought I got an ad. You were just watching an ad.
Look at this run up. It went up this much. So this is called the .com bubble. In 1999 and 2000. It got up to, what was it? $74?
Yeah.
It's never recovered. Since 1999 and 2001, it's never recovered.
Nobody's recovered. Hence the .com bubble.
Well, a lot of companies recovered, like Apple. Like Apple stock, and their stock was like 37 cents. Boy, if we had that stock, we'd be gazillionaires.
It's too easy. It's too easy, Brad.
Too easy.
Gotta keep the money, throw it in, save it in there. Damn, closing remarks. Damn, this is a 2-hour debate? I thought this was supposed to be an hour. I didn't think that was enough time. What Nina want?
No. Something's wrong with Blue. We're back. What up? I'm coming.
He said, my company uses Cisco. Well, Trev, your company is cooking. Now it's just us, Trev. Now it's literally just us. Long hail the hailers. Throw it up, throw it up. That's how we bought out. Throw it up, throw it up. Watch it all fall out. Throw it up, throw it up. That's how we ball out. Throw it up, throw it up. That's how we fall out. I still got more money. I still got more money. We still got more money. She be on it, honey. Oh, I see his signs. See his dollar signs. Hey, we finally hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's some crazy statistic goes right there.
You need to listen.
What's she eat?
Oh.
What's she eat, Brad?
Chocolate.
Oh, that's fine. She's chilling.
Yeah, she had one junior mint.
Yeah, she's chilling. Too big to die to a little chocolate mint.
Focused on the past and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together. That is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we
Trevor's
have
right.
the most lethal fighting force in the world.
This debate was basically a big Q&A.
That will protect our fundamental
No
rights
policy
and freedoms, including the right of a
addressing.
woman to
They keep saying they got a plan, they got a plan, but they don't got a
and
plan.
not have her government tell her what to do.
I was a little worried about
I'll
that
tell
game
you,
the other
I
day.
started my career as a prosecutor.
Yeah,
I was
they
a
had me a
DA,
little
I was an
scared, but
attorney
we ended
general,
up with the
a
dub.
United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right
Willie
now
Brown, that's how
in
she got
you,
into
the American
politics.
people.
I know.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
Trump, what are you going to say?
So she just started by
Closing
saying
remarks.
she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things.
Yeah, they are. This is
Why
them dating.
hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've
There
had
it is.
3.5
That's the
years
question.
to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years
I'll be
to
right there.
create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right
Where
now.
are the
go down to
promises?
that beautiful White House. Go
Why
to
are
the
they not
Capitol,
happening right now?
Get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Well, well, well. That was the debate, Brad.